Blood on the Bayous is supported in part by Dr. B.B. Trotter from Abilene, Texas, and the Fort Butler Foundation. Thank you.
So with a month respite from federal offensive operations, how do the Confederates respond? That'll be the next thing we talk about as we continue our series on Texas and Louisiana in the Civil War. Well, clearly something is coming. You can't have 6 weeks in a row with no fighting without somebody plotting the next move. In fact, one Union officer noted, to sit still was to invite attack. In fact, this prediction proved prescient. Texas Governor Francis R. Lubbock demanded something be done to push the federal presence away from the Texas coast. And he sounds a lot like Governor Moore of Louisiana. In essence, the Confederacy's not doing enough. Lubbock puts it this way: I do not think I overestimate the importance of Texas to the Confederacy, or the interest the government should feel in preventing its being overrun by the enemy. Her wheat fields and her hog and cattle ranches contribute largely to feed the armies. Her wool and cotton factories clothe them in part. Her sons have not been behind the foremost at the call of duty, and have poured out their blood like water upon the battlefield of liberty. She deserves a better fate at the hands of the authorities than to be left with the old men and boys to defend herself. So now Magruder is feeling heat from the civil authorities in Texas, the Confederate civil authorities, to do something. He'd short-stopped Sibley's brigade, so he has some veteran troops at hand, but now what happens? Well, he positioned Sibley's brigade up and down the railroad tracks between Houston and Milliken and says, all right, you guys stand by. We're going to come up with a plan. Now, Magruder feels the imperative not only from Lubbock, but he also feels it from, believe it or not, Nathaniel P. Banks. Nathaniel P. Banks, in order to cover his true mission, which is really the Mississippi River, told reporters that he was bound for Texas. And Magruder believed him. He thought all 30,000 U.S. troops were going to land in Texas shortly, so what he wanted to do is deny them a haven at Galveston Island. So he starts trying to figure out how, with only land forces, he can drive the federal forces, especially the naval component, away from the Texas coast. The solution really comes at the hands of a sailor, the name of Leon Smith, Commander Leon Smith, who's also a major in the Confederate Army. Leon Smith says, look, we're going to do this Roman style. And here's what he meant. The Federals had gunboats, lots of cannon. They were equipped with all the state-of-the-art sort of advances for naval warfare. They had nets to repel boarders. They were really set up for conventional battle. What Leon Smith said to do is, look, we've got river steamers. We've got this old wheezy tug, well, it's not a tug, but it's a packet boat, steamboat called the Bayous City. There's another one called the Neptune, a couple of other ones, wooden steamboats. There were wood tenders and essentially utility boats, the John F. Carr and the Lucy Gwynn. Let's turn these into Cottonclads. What we'll do is, instead of making them into ironclads, we'll just put cotton bales on them where they look like ironclads, but the iron is really nothing more than compressed cotton. These will then serve as a vehicle for carrying troops. We will run these boats into the sides of the much superior U.S. warships, and then the infantry on board these ships will cross over and carry them by boarding. We'll essentially capture them at the point of shotguns and pistols. The reason I say this is Roman style is he actually came up with a device that looks a lot like a Roman corvus, which is a plank with a big spike on it. The idea is to come alongside the Union warship and then drop that plank and that spike drives through the Federal deck, locking the ships together, and then provides a gangplank for people to run across and do their deadly work. And so Magruder says, well, that kind of appeals to my theatrical nature. He's famous for being very flamboyant. And he says, great, let's build these Cottonclads. Well, they only really have enough equipment to outfit two, Bayou City and Neptune. The other two vessels will serve as essentially support vessels and bring along fuel for the other two real warships. Magruder says, you know what? The patriotic citizens of Houston will all volunteer to go aboard these ships and to ram into the sides of Union warships and then carry them at the point of pistols and shotguns. And he puts the word out in the newspaper. All volunteers need to show up downtown so we can put you on this expedition. The citizens of Houston do not turn out. So then he has to turn to some of his troops and says, all right, you know, of these regiments that we're starting to accumulate here, who wants to jump in and be on board these ships? Well, it wasn't universally popular, but one unit, led by Colonel Tom Green, the 5th Texas Cavalry, is assembled in parade. Tom Green goes before his regiment and says, I need 300 volunteers who are willing to die, and die now, to step forward. I don't know about you, but that is a terrible motivational speech. But it has the desired effect, and they have enough people drawn from Sibley's brigade to serve aboard these warships. It's also supplemented by some troops from the 1st Texas Heavy Artillery working the cannons in the bow. All right, so now we have Marines of sorts. They're referred to as horse Marines on board these Cottonclads, and they will then make the surprise naval attack against the Federal warships, while the balance of the brigade, supplemented by other units like the 20th Texas Infantry, 2nd Texas Cavalry, will go across the causeway to Galveston Island and attack from the land. So it'll be a land-sea attack. Now, why are the causeways still in? Why is the causeway? Why is the big bridge to Galveston Island still intact? Pretty simple. The Confederates didn't want the city to starve because they're related to people on that island, and the Federals didn't want to have to defeat them. So almost by a gentleman's agreement, they let the bridges stand. So that makes it easy for the Confederates to go over there and actually patrol the streets of Galveston while the Federals are out at sea, you know, a couple of 100 yards off the coast watching the city. So it's a very strange, neither fish nor fowl situation going on in Galveston Island. Magruder thinks he's got the solution, and Leon Smith will lead the naval component. Magruder will see to the land component. Now, what they're facing is a half dozen U.S. warships. Half dozen U.S. warships in the roads at Galveston, and on Christmas Day, 1862, the first of the U.S. infantry arrives, and they're landed at Coons Wharf. Now, as I mentioned previously, it's only 3 companies. E.J. Davis, who is raising the 1st Texas Cavalry, will follow up in a few days, as will Andrew Jackson Hamilton. Andrew Jackson Hamilton will be the Union military governor of Texas while they are busy reestablishing a Unionist government. Galveston is absolutely critical. Everybody realizes that. The Federals realize that. Governor Lubbock realizes that. Magruder realizes that. Galveston needs to be retaken if the Confederacy is going to avoid what's going on in Louisiana from happening in Texas. Well, on December 31st, the Naval Flotilla heads down towards Galveston Island. The land component gets into position, and they have one final check. Rowboat comes into a telegraph station at Morgan's Point, and there they're handed a message sent from Magruder's headquarters. Pretty simple statement. It says, all is ready. The Rangers of the Prairie send greetings to the Rangers of the Sea. Well, this was a signal that Magruder was going to attack in the very early hours of January 1st, 1863. And with any luck, he hoped, Galveston would return to Confederate control.